There are many successful Roblox games, a lot of which generate revenue in real life. So, it would make sense for people wanting to capitalize on it. But, there are two big studios on Roblox that you'll recognize almost immediately. These companies exploit this system for money. The name of these huge corporations are called Doobig Studios and GameFam. The whole gimmick is they buy games from other developers and take and receive a small percentage of revenue from that game. But to get more profit, they litter your screen with tons of ads, so you'll end up spending more. This is the greed of the two biggest studios on Roblox. In this video, we are going to break it down and cover the allegations and summarize how greedy these studios really are. I think it's easier to start with Doobig Studios because while they are problematic, they're definitely less problematic than GameFam is. Now, firstly, what is Doobig Studios? Well, Doobig was made by John Canada and he founded it May 20th, 2020. And their first release was a game called Hospital Life. Around August 11th, 2020, Doobig released a game called Speedrun Simulator, which they sold a few years later. They didn't buy their first game until 2021 to 2022, and they did it very silently, so very few people actually knew of its existence. The game they had actually bought was called Clicker Simulator, and it eventually did go private after it was sold to another studio shortly after it was bought. In 2023, Doobig still really hadn't made a name for themselves. However, this is when they started buying a bunch of games. Now, the first big game they bought that really put the studio on some people's radars was Race Clicker, which a lot of you know how boring and greedy that game is, but we'll touch on that later. Mid-2023, Doobig bought their first big successful game, a game a lot of you know and recognize, the game called Blade Ball. Now, in my opinion, Blade Ball was already bad and boring, but when Doobig bought it, it got worse, which is a common theme you'll see throughout this video. Finally, in 2024 to 2025, Doobig had bought Fish, a fishing game that was very popular on Roblox, which they had also ruined. Like, seriously bad. No one wanted to play it anymore after they bought it. They had also bought a Dusty Trip and Baddies. The most recent game they bought was a game called Grow a Garden, which many people were not happy about. But with all the games they buy, there's one thing they have in common: the amount of pay-to-win items and ads littered throughout the game, which reasonably makes a lot of fans for the game very upset. It's why so many people hate Doobig, because despite what they say are how many billions of views they get for their quote-unquote games, they actually don't care for their players. Obviously, they only care about making the biggest amount of cash with these games. However, you can give credit for being able to spend insane amount of Robux, especially with Dead Rails. Doobig tried buying Dead Rails for around 800 million Robux, I believe, which results to 200 million to 8 million in real life American dollars. So good for Dead Rails turning down tons of money, because otherwise it would have ended up like a Dusty Trip. So, summing up, Doobig is basically just Nintendo without all the copyright. Although they'd probably copyright anything if it meant getting more money into their pockets. Now, Doobig was fairly easy to cover, and it didn't last long, but now it's time we cover GameFam, which can be seen as objectively worse than Doobig, considering they have a lot more allegations than Doobig does. GameFam was founded in 2019 in California by Joe Francis. He said, and I quote, "Roblox truly is a metaverse for this younger generation. What that means is that each game needs to have a very distinctive and attractive immersion to it." In other words, Roblox has a young audience, so we can put as much gambling and ads for money as we want without getting in trouble. And the games aren't exactly immersive in the way they were hoping for either, but nonetheless, GameFam has partnered with over 5 different big companies. They have partnered with Hot Wheels, WoW, Sega, and Paramount Global to bring games to the platform. While all these games have a huge player base, it's pretty easy to see they're just a reskin gambling machine. Now, other than the obvious gambling controversy GameFam has, there are bigger things to worry about. So, on December 9th, 2022, GameFam tweeted something announcing Sonic Prime for the Speed Simulator, which allowed people who bought it to get perks in the game, but also in other games like Starving Artist and Funky Friday. The creator of the original Friday Night Funkin' game responded and mentioned that his lawyer will be hearing about this. Now, I don't know if they won the lawsuit, but I assume they did since the game is no longer up. They did come out with a quote-unquote apology, which sucked because they didn't care, like, at all. They didn't even apologize. However, it doesn't end there. Later that month, ex-employees of GameFam called out GameFam for making them work overtime while also underpaying them. And they seriously mistreated their employees to where they couldn't even get gas station food. Now, thankfully, GameFam employees ended up unionizing in response to this, which, I mean, good for them, you know? And finally, when GameFam partnered with Crunchyroll for MHA, the greedy bastards filed a DMCA claim against 2 big anime games on Roblox because they had MHA in them, which really sucked because GameFam had MHA in the old games even without the IP for the anime, so they're just being hypocritical here. And the MHA game ended up dying instantly because it was a paid access beta, which literally no one wanted to play, and the controls sucked, so like, what did they expect? Now, between these 2 big companies, zero action has been taken on either of them at all. And in fact, these 2 studios just bring in a lot of cash, not only for themselves, but also for Roblox, which is probably why Roblox hasn't disbanded or done anything with these studios at all. They just don't see it as a big deal. So, as much as we all hate these studios, there really isn't much we can do at the moment other than hope that eventually they'll get the message and leave Roblox alone. But I think that's going to be it for this video. It was relatively short because this exact topic has already been talked about like 1,000 times, so there's no point on going in depth for it. But if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.